It is Thursday, January 13th, and I'll call this Lacey City Council work session to order. We have a couple amendments to the agenda. We're going to move down to council assignments and committees and intergovernmental boards and commissions discussions till the last item. I was just meeting with the deputy mayor and Scott, and we were trying to put that all together, and so we're that will be coming later in our discussion. And it looks like we're going to start off with interlocal agreement with the First and Regional Climate Action Plan Phase 4. That will be first on our agenda. And then we're also going to add to our agenda the discussion of the home fund. I just have an update from that. We'll do that maybe as our last thing on the agenda. But with given those amendments, can I get a motion to approve?
Move to approve the amended agenda.
Second.
It's been moved in second. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion, signify by saying aye.
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 Is there anyone opposed? Then that motion unanimously carries. We have the amended agenda. And first up, our amended agenda is the interlocal agreement with the Thurston Regional Climate Action Plan Phase 4. I'll turn this over to Rick Walk and go from there.
And I'm going to actually turn it right over to Grant because he'll provide the presentation. But I also want to introduce Allison Osterberg from TRPC. She's been our main point of contact and coordinator of the regional work on climate action plan. So she'll be here also to provide information and answer any questions the council may have. So with that, I'll turn it over to Grant for his introduction.
Thank you. We're here to brief the council tonight on an interlocal agreement, which continues a project that we began back in 2018 with when we started a regional climate action planning process with our fellow jurisdictions, Lacey, Olympia, Tumwater, and Thurston County. Phase 1 of that project resulted in the establishment of baseline of actions to date, to that date that had been done by the jurisdiction to combat climate change. And it also established regional emissions reduction targets. Phase 2 of the continuing process continued the effort with the development of the Thurston Climate Mitigation Plan itself. That plan was issued on December 20th, 2020 by TRPC. And as with everything TRPC does, it went through a very healthy and active public participation process and discussion with the Climate Action Committee. The plan, in effect, it articulated a shared vision for how climate mitigation activities align with our community goals. It helped with understanding of the activities in our community that contribute to greenhouse gas emissions. It listed regional strategies that aim to lower greenhouse gas emissions. It estimated the impact of those strategies each of those strategies would have on achieving the regional goals. And it created a strategy for implementing the plan itself and the action measures. So after the adoption of that plan with its policies and strategies, last year the city continued working with our partners through Phase 3, which is really the implementation part, started the implementation process. It began by narrowing the focus on specific strategies and actions from the larger list found in the mitigation plan that would be most effective to implement sooner rather than later. This happened through a series of briefings and updates to the Climate Action Steering Committee by stakeholders and experts in the field, and will result in a series of white papers on climate mitigation strategies. Those are expected to be presented to the committee the first quarter of this year. Phase 3 also resulted in an agreement with the committee as to governance of the committee itself and how to move forward with the work program identified in the mitigation plan. The result of that part of phase 3 is the draft ILA that we're talking about tonight, which continues the implementation of the mitigation plan. The phase 4 ILA before you would cover the regional committee and the efforts of that committee over the next 3 years to continue to develop regional strategies and actions to implement the mitigation plan. While the governance structure is for a 3-year period, work programs will be developed by the committee itself for the upcoming year, each year, in time for the various jurisdictions to review that work program as part of our budget process. Highlights of the Highlights of the 2022, this year's work program include the launch of a community-wide residential energy efficiency program, a study to assess the cost, benefits, and pitfalls of building electrification by eliminating new natural gas in new construction. And Rick will be talking more about that in detail in the upcoming agenda matter. And exploring options as to how to finance future climate mitigation work regionally. And finally, to design and launch the first phase of a regional carbon sequestration study. And this is the big piece that we're really looking forward to getting more information about as we move forward with local implementation of the climate mitigation plan and reviewing plans such as our urban forestry management plan and tree regulations as it actually meets the document, as the rubber meets the road through implementation. The cost to Lacey for the first year of the ILA is just over $60,000. This represents Lacey's share of the base cost to provide staff support to the committee and the work program. The staff support is around $55,000 and the program costs are just over $4,000. And if I can answer any questions at this time, or if Allison, do you want to weigh in with any details, or did I miss anything since I'm kind of picking this up fresh from Jessica?
Grant, I think you gave a great overview, and good evening, Allison Osterberg with Thurston Regional Planning Council, and just want to emphasize how much we have appreciated all our partners working together on this issue. The one thing I would highlight, maybe that wasn't brought out as part of this phase 4 agreement, is to continue that. The biggest parts of it are continuing that coordination work among the different jurisdictions and around monitoring and tracking progress toward achieving those greenhouse gas targets. So that's another big piece that's in this phase 4 agreement, is really digging into how are we doing against our metrics and being able to communicate that out to the public to say what have we done and is it getting us where we need to go. So that was a big part of what we put into that phase 4 agreement.
Rick, do you have anything you want to add to any of this?
Someday I won't have those words pop up on my screen that I'm muted. No, I think Grant and Allison covered everything fairly well. I'll talk more about the electrification study on the next agenda item, but really just want to be able to respond to any of the council members' questions.
Well, I'm really interested in for Lacey getting to the next phase, which what we've talked about is, looking at grant programs for energy efficiency upgrades and so on and so forth. When are we going to actually get to that sort of discussion? I mean, that's the $60,000 isn't going towards any of what we're trying to do is actually implement and do some good here in Lacey.
So maybe I will add some more things. So we do have, with the adoption of the TCMP and incorporation into our comp plan, we do have our local implementation priorities. And as you mentioned, we have energy efficiency audits, energy efficiency upgrade programs. We also have EV charging station expansion, LED work. So we have a series of local identified priorities for implementation. We'll be bringing, talking about those in a little more detail at our upcoming joint work session with the Planning Commission on the 2022 work program and implementation measures. So we got to put together the program and how we start launching some of that, some of those implementation items. We do have in the 2022 budget a line item for climate plan implementation, which is intended for our local initiatives. When the conversation about the phase 4 ILA start coming out around September, October, and developing the work program and funding for 2022 and 2 years beyond at the regional level, it was coming right at the end of our budget cycle. So we were looking at potentially, if this is approved to move forward, we would need to do a budget amendment to accommodate these funds separate from our currently budgeted local implementation funds.
Okay. Carolyn, I know you're the ones that you've been the lead on a lot of this. Do you have anything you want to add? Sorry for putting you on the spot.
No, that's okay. Well, I guess one thing that particularly maybe some of our newer council members should know is that this doesn't just come out of nowhere. I mean, there's state law is requiring that we reduce carbon emissions by 45% below what they were in 1990. And we have until, 8 years essentially to do this. And to get net zero emissions by 2050. And so this is setting Thurston County's roadmap to starting to achieve those things. With the implementation phase of this now, I think it's also important to note that the steering committee is identifying projects that we need to do together in order to collectively, move the needle some. But we also have flexibility, as Rick was saying, to take on the projects that we've identified for Lacey that we think that are important. And I think that's a really important part of this whole agreement is that, it's not forcing us really into anything. It's allowing us to work collectively on some things and individually on others. And I don't know, Allison, is there anything you would want to add to that part of the understanding?
No, that's very well said. I would say one thing I've heard anecdotally from some of our other partners and staff that as they're going out and looking for grants for their things their individual jurisdictions want to do, some of the feedback they've had is that the fact that they're participating in this broader regional effort is something that's seen as making them more competitive for achieving some of those funding resources. So even for an individual jurisdiction, the fact that there might be, for some groups, an opening into a broader number of organizations. It might be piloted in one, but they could see it being applied more broadly. And that I've heard from a couple of folks is making them a little more competitive for funding.
Robin, do you have your hand up? I'm sorry, I don't see that
Yeah.
on my screen.
For future reference, is it better if I just physically raise my hand than if I put it up via Zoom?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll do that. So it's easier.
Well, it depends on where you're at on my screen. That you happen to be on the top of my screen right now, and so I can't see. Anyway, yeah.
Okay.
Speak.
Well,
Yeah, speak up. Don't be worried. Always speak up.
Roger that. Yeah, what I was going to say is just kind of on Carolyn's point. It seems like a lot of the tasks that we're paying for in this phase 4 is the research that is going to let us make better decisions on our local initiatives, right? Like, where are we going to get the best bang for our buck? What is it going to cost to do electrification versus, changing the structure of our energy grid? Like TRPC is going to bring together the research on that so that we can make better decisions. But I just wanted to share that it's nice to see the monitoring and assessment piece added, Allison, so that we can get regular updates on kind of like, are we making progress toward our goals? I wondered, is that going to be contracted? Is that monitoring and assessment structure going to be done by TRPC staff? What will that look like?
So the way we envision it now is that TRPC already has, you may be aware, a pretty robust data program around our profile. And so we'd be building on that, building it into that. So in past years, the greenhouse gas inventory has been done by Thurston Climate Action Team, and they've done a great job, but they've done it on a volunteer basis with the resources they could find. And so we really think we'd be able to, by taking that part on, there's a lot of other folks doing this work at the state level and at other local jurisdictions. And so kind of creating that community of best practices where we can really ramp up what we can track and how we can pull out that usable information for individual jurisdictions. Where are you seeing the most energy use? What are the sectors that are affecting you? Being able to use that a little more flexibly as we go forward.
That's great. Thanks.
Rick, is this going to come before us at upcoming council meeting for approval?
Well, I believe even at tonight's work session, if you decide that council's ready to move forward, you can take an action to authorize the interlocal agreement. I'm gonna kind of look towards our city manager, Scott Spence, to make sure that he's okay with that. But one of the things is trying to move forward with 2022. We're already in 2022. So if we're ready to move forward, you can take that action tonight.
Scott?
So that is accurate. I know we typically try to reserve work sessions for discussion. So it's the comfortability of council if they want to take action tonight, or we can put it on the next agenda. Our next city council meeting would be next Thursday.
When is this group planning on meeting next? When does this need to be done by?
So the steering committee is meeting on Monday, January 24th. And so they're going to take up they've already discussed all of the items that are in front of you. I think one thing we were waiting was to make sure that all of the city councils and boards had a chance individually for the representatives to go back and have conversations like this. So it's coming back to that group. They're going to make their final decision on it. And then it's up to each individual jurisdiction to do that. Our current phase 3 agreement goes through into April. So that's where we're at with that.
Okay, well, I don't see any reason to make do the action right now if we're not in a time crunch. Let's just have it come before our next council meeting, and we can do it then. Is there any other discussion? Okay, thank you, appreciate it.
Thank you, Adam.
Next up is this interlocal agreement for the regional building electrification cost assessment study.
Yes, I'll start off on this topic. This is a request, again, for if council's ready tonight, or you can take action at a future council meeting to authorize an interlocal agreement to participate in the development of a study to analyze the potential impacts of implementing policies from the Thurston Climate Mitigation Plan to start transitioning to buildings to electrification. And what the study would focus on is for new construction, as new construction comes on, to require them to be 100% electrically sourced and to prohibit natural gas connections. And this is a topic that's been discussed at length or quite a bit over the last year and a half with the development of the TCMP. One of the reasons is it was identified in the 2018 assessment of Thurston County sources of greenhouse gas emissions as about 15 of the emissions that were identified, about 59% of that were from buildings and energy. And so there was this looking at the electrification of buildings was looked at as a measure to have some positive impact to carbon reduction. On the other hand, there's been a lot of conversation about what is the impact to construction costs, services. What does that look like in terms of cost? Does it put barriers up to new construction and development and activity? And because there hasn't been any direct studies here locally, it's been suggested that we develop this study to analyze those impacts so there's better information for the various councils and commission to take action with more information at some point in the future if the various jurisdictions decide to take action on this, implementing this strategy. So what this interlocal agreement will do is since this was initially brought up and suggested by the city of Olympia, they would be the lead on managing the contract with the consultant. One thing I want to step back a little bit and as we looked at the previous interlocal agreement for next year's work program, it was mentioned that this was on that list. But because it was identified as other sources and separate from that regional conversation, that's why it's a breakout to a separate funding source and separate interlocal agreement. The estimate to complete the study is just over $30,000. If all four jurisdictional partners, Olympia, Lacey, Tumwater, and Thurston County, participate in that study, it'd be a proportionate cost to each jurisdiction of just over $7,600 each. Again, as I mentioned before, the city of Olympia would manage the contract with the consultant. However, all four partners would participate in that study by being part of an advisory committee that would be able to have monthly check-ins and also be able to have input and provide data and information for that study, and then ultimately review the preliminary draft before it becomes final. Again, this process is intended to study the potential impacts of this potential policy decision of implementing this particular action. And it doesn't mean that with this decision today, that that future policy action would be taken. That'd be a different and separate decision by the council in the future. So again, this is just to develop information so that the various policy decisions have more information. So with that quick overview, I know there's probably some questions on this. I'll just stop right there and respond to questions. And
Robin, question?
Sorry, there was a 5-year-old bouncing off my chair just a minute ago. That's why I got the background on. To clarify this, we're studying the potential impact of future policy change on future buildings, right? This is not, we're not looking at the impact of electrifying existing infrastructure, existing buildings. It would be for future construction.
Correct. So if a jurisdiction adopted this action, then any application that would come in for new development after that point would then be subject to this particular policy.
But this is just to do all the background information to give us the data of how much it's going to cost, what are the impacts, so on and so forth. It's not saying this is what we're going to do. It's just doing study work. So we have the information if we want to adopt that at a future.
Correct. That's important clarification. This is just to study the impacts if that type of policy decision was implemented.
Okay. Ed?
Yeah, just a comment. It would be interesting to get feedback from Olympia Master Builders on this topic as well. Just to see if there's a cohesion between the two efforts to make that determination, or if Olympia Master Builders has a different approach and a perspective to show what it is going to cost us in the future to do something like this.
That's a very good point, and that's something that if we embark on this study, that should be part of that conversation and information. They should be involved in that study. And then also too, if we participate in this study, we have the opportunity to have a voice as it's developed and ask those questions and include those parties.
Lenny?
Yeah, so I think everyone knows how I feel about hiring consultants to do pointless studies. So I guess my first question is, has there not been research done on this? I mean, I get we haven't done it here locally, but I have to imagine that the data is already available for how much difference there is to cost of construction, to what it actually does as far as energy use and all of that. I just find it hard to imagine that data isn't already out there somewhere without paying for another study.
There is information. I don't know what that information is at hand. I'm sure, like they said, I'm sure there is information out. What this does is this study is going to be conducted based on our local conditions, but also probably include some of those others as examples or best case studies. Now, what this will do for staff is we would be able to share in that cost and not have to necessarily lead that conversation. If we didn't do this, we would still have to do that research and do that study to provide information to council once the issue comes up. And at that point, we'd be more in a reactive stage than a proactive stage.
Yeah, additionally, PSC must have some idea of what this is going to do to their grid. If if our focus is on converting everything to electric over time, I'm sure that they have something tangible that we can look at too for consideration.
Correct. And that's another key point too. We don't know what's going to happen in the future because things have changed, but based on state policy decisions and legislation as well. So there's those pieces that could play into this as we look into the issue.
Yeah, I definitely think we should be at the table to be able to be asking the same questions that we were asked on, on this from several council members. I don't know the information. I don't know what the impact is to change go straight electric. I don't know if our grid can handle it. I don't know any of that information. So it does look like we need to have some more information. It'd be nice if that information was already available for us and we wouldn't have to spend these dollars, but it looks like in this case, it's sort of site specific. And so I guess we're gonna have to take our conditions and our grid into account and so on and so forth. So I for the dollar amount here, it makes sense to be at the table and be a part of this study, and then it'll obviously come back to our council, and we'll have to make a decision on what we do going forward. I definitely think we should be a part of this, and we'll see what the study says. I'm with you, Lenny. I hate doing studies just for the sake of studies, but in this circumstance, I don't know where else we get this information, so I feel like we probably have to be a part of this. Lenny?
Yeah, and I don't disagree. I mean, I'll support this only for one reason. I think the $7,000 or so cost will actually be less than it would be for our own staff to actually just do the research. I believe all the information is already there, but the time that it'll take Rick and his staff to get the information would be a bad use of the time as opposed to the $7,000. So
I agree. And I also think that we should take action at our next council meeting. I just don't like doing that at the work session. If that's okay with this council? Okay.
I think
Okay.
Robin, hand up.
Okay, Robin, go for it. Sorry.
I was just going to confess that I had similar thoughts to Lenny when I was reviewing the agreement, that from my perspective, this seems, based on what was written into the climate mitigation plan, shifting to electrification instead of use of fossil fuels in future buildings seems like an obvious choice if our goal is to reduce carbon emissions. But I think that we will still get some valuable information out of the study.
Yeah. Well, and I don't really know, what's the difference in a cost of a therm generated by electricity compared to the cost of a therm generated by natural gas compared to, so then what is that cost on the end user? Right? There's a bunch of questions I don't know the answer to, and so I think we need those answers before we can go forward. And then when I first heard about this, I thought they were looking at larger multifamily housing and stuff like that compared to just single family resident. A single family resident obviously isn't using very much compared to, say, a large commercial building or a large multifamily complex. That that could be a big difference too. And so maybe they'll look into that a little bit more. I mean, on one hand, we're trying to find affordable housing, and on the other hand, we're trying, there's a lot of policy discussions here, and so I think this is good information that will help us make some of those decisions going forward. Okay, thank you, everyone. Anyone have any questions? Okay, so
I have one last comment.
Go for it.
Well, the session's over, so it's always dangerous to offer one more thing up, but I just want to suggest too that it's not just the residential and commercial construction and buildings of operation, but the other thing I want to find out too is what does this type of policy consideration do for certain types of uses that rely on natural gas, for restaurants and those type of things and ongoing operation and technology. So there's a lot to it, that it's not just heating and cooling of buildings and those type of things. There's other applications that we need to look at as well.
That's a good point. I mean, what, we can no longer have Burger Kings and any more Burger Kings because don't they use the plain broil? Anyway,
all restaurants cook on gas. No restaurants don't cook on electric. You can't control the flame in an electric stove.
Yeah, that's a good point. Okay, that'll be interesting to see how this goes along. Hearing back on it. So next up is the Great Curio Park and Greenway Master Plan. Yay. Jen.
Hey, Jen.
Hello. Good evening. It's nice to see everyone. We've got Juliet here. Oh, good. Okay. So thanks again. Thanks for joining us again, Juliet. Juliet Vong is here from HBB Landscape Architects. So I'm going to give a quick intro and then hand it over to her for the presentation. So we are here to review the draft Great Curio Park and Greenways Master Plan. Since we were last here at Worksession in mid-October, we've held the public workshop number 3 in November. And then in December, the park board recommended this draft plan to you that's in your packet. Well, it's a link. Hopefully that was all right for being able to check those larger files. And that was the same link that we provided to the public. So that hopefully worked well for you all to be able to review it. So now we are moving toward final approval by the council at your February 3rd meeting. And tonight, Juliet is going to walk you through the draft master plan. I will hand it to her.
All right, good evening, everybody. I'm going to start by sharing my screen and get myself set up here so you can see this hopefully well. As a reminder, once I do this, Jen, I'm not able to easily track if hands are raised or if people put comments in the track. I'm just not talented enough to do that many things at once. So if there are questions, please stop me, and I know Jen will help track any of that and interject as well if needed. What we've got here tonight is an introduction. We've built this recognizing that this gets posted to the public, and so the presentation is built as a bit more of a complete package for those members of the public or council who maybe aren't as familiar with the site, haven't been part of all of the past meetings. I'm going to cruise through a good portion of this and really just focus on the things that have changed or new information that we haven't presented yet to the council. So if I do start going too fast, please by all means let me know. So we're going to focus more on this item 4 for the final master plan. I'll highlight a key elements that we haven't really discussed in great detail, and then we just will close with a couple of next steps. All right. Acknowledgement, if you care to read it again, huge kudos to Mr. Greg Curio, and this describes a little bit about his recognition and his influence in getting this park. We always like to still include our link and our QR code to the project website for more information. And then, of course, where we're at in the world in the northern portion of the city, our boundary for our park. And as a reminder to everybody, this is the park and greenways. So we have the 3 parcels that make up Great Curio Park, and this master plan does also include Pleasant Glade Park, Palm Creek Headwaters, and 2 protected water rights conservation parcels as well. So important to think of this larger context and its relationship to each other. We spent a fair amount of time early in the process looking at the environment and studying the site itself. This is that snapshot of all of the environmental systems on the site and their associated buffers. As a reminder, again, as you move into final design of any various phases, a lot of boots on the ground. While we walked a good portion of the site, it's over 500 acres. And so as different areas are developed, the detailed analysis, the actual survey of the site conditions will inform that final design process. Throughout our process, we've talked about these vision and goals. I think they still have the same importance, and we've used these all along the way to test the design concepts proposed, help make decisions and help inform this master plan process. Core to that is the balance between the preservation and protection and enhancement of this amazing property with still allowing access and having those recreational opportunities to the park. So 3 open house virtual meetings, over 333. We're going to love the number 3, as it just so happens here. Meeting participants, 632 online survey responses, and 20 specific stakeholder organizations that we reached out to as part of our public process that really informed those vision and goal statements and our guiding principles, the programming events that we are proposing for the final park master plan. I'm just going to pause a little bit here and talk about that last open house and that 3rd survey. So what we did is we presented the proposed park master plan, talked about our responses to the comments and the feedback we heard. And so as a snapshot, this gives you some information on what we heard at that 3rd open house. I think there was a lot of discussion about connecting communities, neighborhoods, just a lot of real positive support for the value of this park. There was some specific ideas talked about, some ideas and some interest in the botanical gardens, ornamental plantings, which is kind of part of that demonstration and food forest that we have. There was some discussion about bike infrastructure and really the opportunity of this park to be a connection, a multimodal connection outside of a street system. And so as much as the implementation can think about and consider that as part of the process. We discussed pickleball courts again and talked about why it's not part of the plan. And then the disc golf and its expansion. One of the comments, we actually got a number of comments about restrooms and just, I think a lot of people, we had only shown 1 restroom, and I'll talk about this and show you on the plan, a desire for more restrooms, just recognizing the value this park is going to have. A lot of the same concerns as we've heard all along, and I think these will continue to come up in future implementation phases. I think these are very valid concerns and comments, and then at each design and final design needs to continue to consider these concerns and help support kind of a long-term strategy and approach to alleviate noise, make sure we're using good design principles to reduce the possibilities of vandalism, homelessness, things like that as we go through the process. We did ask specifically about activities shown and what they like, and if they liked what was presented or not. Some people talked about a need for more parking and included and commented on a variety of different elements that for reasons that we've previously talked about are not necessarily relevant to this type of a park, but still, valid as interests for the community and other locations. 42% really liked or loved the concept as presented. A number of suggestions about continuing to integrate some of the concerns that had been raised in the past. And then same for the Pleasant Glade. We had lots of talk about this, the walking trails, the suspension bridges, and some interest about being more ADA accessible. The final master plan, you've seen these slides before, and so I'm just going to kind of go through a little bit. The elements remain the same. We still have the same access points, the same considerations. The primary trails remain the same as what you've seen previously highlighted here. You'll see there's not a connection, a secondary connection for trails makes this what looks like a blank probably on your screen because I know this is pretty small. Secondary trails, because of the topography that we have, it is not able to be fully ADA accessible. So we left that as a slightly lower footprint. And then secondary trails remain throughout the more sensitive areas of the park. We do have a mountain bike trail that is still in the master plan up in this northeast corner. And then as we move in, this is what we're calling that core area.
Juliet, sorry,
Yes.
Juliet. I see Robin, Councilmember Vasquez, her hand is up.
Just wanted to ask if the secondary trails are also paved, even if they're not ADA accessible.
The secondary trails are not generally intended to be paved, so they could be, and in the main core area of the park where we have the highest intensity uses, I would expect more of those trails to be paved. As you move beyond this core area, though, we would expect them to be softer surfaces. So 4 to 6 foot in width, unpaved surfaces is what's intended for the rest of these trails. With crushed rock surfaces, you can actually use a finer grain crushed material to make it more accessible. It doesn't have to be like a small woodland forest foot trail. We do want a decent amount of width to be able to make it feel safe and comfortable and be able to be as accessible as possible. But we are not intending to pave all of these trails, both due to the cost of paving, as well as trying to keep the visual and the natural footprint in the environment.
Thank you.
The core areas and programming elements do remain the same. We did shift things a little bit to allow for a better use and flexibility of use for major runs, like the cross-country meets, fun runs, things like that, so that we could make sure we had enough space for a full 5 and a 10K within the open space areas. The one thing that is added, we had a central restroom located here, which is really close to the playgrounds, the food forest, demonstration gardens, picnic areas. What we did also do is we pulled in a second restroom over by the dog park. In reality, this upper parking lot here is likely to be used more by the dog park, and also is really the launching point for the trail system to the north, as well as the disc golf course. And so if you think about people going through those activities and spending time on these trails, to come back to your car and have to sort of walk a farther distance just felt like it was a little too much. So having a little bit better access to restrooms for this northern segment was important. So that was added. There was a little bit of work, just refinement around the maintenance facility, really in looking at the desire for the full build out from the Parks Department maintenance crew and kind of the associated stormwater facilities that would be needed to support them. Really just mostly focusing on making sure we have the space allocated so that we can get the budget a little bit more refined. The rest of these elements remain basically the same and in the same orientation as what you've seen previously. As we move to the other half of the core area, this is really that environmental learning and small meeting space. You can see the meeting space is darkened in here with the potential future expansion to a full environmental learning center. We talked a lot about adding a restroom over here as well, but in reality, that once the use of this is really dependent on the improvement of the small meeting space. And so as that design progresses, there's a lot of opportunities to bring in a restroom, an indoor, outdoor, accessible restroom, things like that. So we felt that that could be managed within the final design of this area. I've just pulled in a series of photos that you've seen before that highlight some of the different programmatic elements and describes them. This is again repeated in the report itself within greater detail. So you can see they all still remain in the park. Are there any questions so far?
Councilmember Cox, you're on mute.
Thank you. In looking at the disc golf and the overview here, I didn't realize it was quite so much completely in the forested area. So could you share with us a little bit about what the impact on the trees in that area is going to be?
Yeah. So again, this is very conceptual in nature, and a lot of work does need to go into actually laying out the individual tees and baskets for supporting the disc golf. That is often done in close coordination and oftentimes just by the community group themselves. What ends up happening as you do this, there are some holes that can be accessed with just short spurs off of the main trail system, and we try to locate a lot of those in that context. We are careful that you don't cross that trail, that you're throwing your disc away from the trail. What that results in is there is a tertiary level of trail that helps interconnect these that are much smaller sort of woodland trails. We keep all of that outside of the wetland and their associated buffers. Really, the impact to the trees themselves is in some compaction that happens around the roots, specifically around the starting and the endpoints of these elements. That happens with all of these trails. Any of these trail systems that come through does have a level of compaction that happens as you're developing these trails and as people use these trails. The trees immediately around them have that impact from the compaction. There's not really erosion that goes into it any more than you'd expect in a normal trail. A little bit of the understory gets impacted a little bit higher level just because those errant discs have to go get retrieved. But part of the long-term maintenance and cost associated with it is a recognition that there's a little bit higher level of forest management around the disc golf course, just to help mitigate and continue to just keep an eye on the trees and the health of the trees around the course itself.
I think I might not have been as clear as I should have been on my question.
Oh, sorry.
That's all right. Basically, are we going to have to take out a bunch of trees in order to create this disc golf course?
So
That's tough to
not
say.
usually.
You want me to, oh,
Yeah. Go ahead, Jen. I mean, I'm pretty been involved in disc golf. So this is just a rough conceptual where this is at. They have to still go out there and sort of map out the course. And so, no, usually you don't. I mean, there may be some trees here and there that you got to take out, but that's not the intent. The intent is to try to find a course where you take out the least amount of trees to make the course happen.
and then I
And
can
that's
add to that.
usually the
I can add to
beauty.
that. The
Go ahead.
trees are desired because they make it more challenging for the players.
Exactly.
And so, like the mayor said, that the intent is not to take out, it's to take out as few trees as possible. But there is impact. And I think when we talked about this last time, we sort of discussed the wellness aspects of having the disc golf course and being able to have families out there and walking through the woods, and the intergenerational component, just kind of that health and wellness benefit, and just kind of weighing in on that as well. So that's my 2 cents on the disc golf.
And that was exactly what I was going to reiterate as well. So I think that covered it.
I am really excited for the disc golf and for the whole park. And it's just a beautiful, beautiful setup. Really
Yeah.
impressed with what we're talking about here.
And having a course like this, a full 18 holes, a championship style course, is going to be pretty
It'd be a
amazing
good,
for our
good
community.
tourism draw too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead and you can continue.
All right. So this one was conveniently the next slide about the disc golf, just to show that in a little bit better highlight. We did bring in the parks maintenance facility. I don't think we really showed this in any great level of detail previously. There's been a lot of detailed meetings with park staff and maintenance staff about both their long-term vision to bring all of the park system into this location long-term, but also thinking about what a satellite maintenance facility would be, what an initial phasing might be to build this online in stages, and at what point a maintenance facility or some portion of the maintenance facility is triggered to go along with some of the improvements being proposed. So you can see here, it is intended to be across the street from the main entrance to the park, so it has its own designated entrance. While this is in wetland buffer areas, the buffer right now is highly disturbed. It is mostly blackberries. So this is really an opportunity to kind of do, or I should say it's partially in buffers, but it's really an opportunity to improve the wetland system. And we have the space here associated to do that. The separated ability allows a little bit better security. It allows access, and it's not the first thing you really necessarily want to see when you go into your park. So it really keeps those uses separate, but in close proximity to each other. The other one we wanted to show in greater detail was this community event space. So again, the kind of main core area of the park is here. You'd have a continuation of the access drive to the event space, we have to be outside of the RCO purchase zone, which is one of the reasons why it pulls it off to the side. The other reason is it also does kind of set us a little bit more into the forest, which is beneficial for both rental of uses, but also the environmental learning component to this. And it does allow us to actually kind of block off this drive as well. So as events might happen or maintenance purposes or for any reason, you can really kind of control access to and from these areas a little bit better. It's designed to have an indoor facility. That's the pink kind of salmon colored area here, with an entry that gives you a main reception kind of space, restrooms associated with it, and then a series of classrooms that can be divided with temporary closures or one large classroom. We have almost the same amount of square footage in the covered outdoor area, so you have a lot of in and out opportunities and expansion of use. And then the purple area, bluish here, it would be the future expansion, which essentially mirrors the event space. So you could rent an entire space, you have the covered area in between, and it also gives a lot of opportunity for future partnerships that you could have a more permanent partner that helps operate and maintain while still allowing public access and rentable spaces in the other half of the site. And then the design interconnects that with its own little woodland walk, kind of more of an interpretive trail and a nature play that is geared more towards that nature and those nature elements. So logs, rocks, things that would support an educational program in this zone. You've seen these slides before, but for just continuity of the use in the program, programmatic elements of the space, this is our large event space, which would be more of an open lawn, kind of a series of meadows and more formalized lawn to use. So this would be a series of 10 by 10 tents if it was a farmer's market or some other kind of a festival. Amphitheater, tents, other kinds of spaces that could be used and tucked into some of the hills. And then there was a fair amount of work kind of spent working through the local cross-country coach who is involved on a national level to make sure it could be used and utilized for cross-country meets as well, which provides the 5K, allows us to double it for a 10K, and then you start to have a lot of opportunities for starting points, a large group to begin, areas for viewing, areas for TV, areas for lots of different sized events. So that was some of the shifting we did of these outermost areas of the core so that we could have space to have those functions happen. Any questions on the programming and the uses?
I'll have to speak up. I don't see anything.
One question.
Go ahead.
Are the options that you just laid out either or?
No,
we have to
they
choose
are
them?
all just different ways that you could use the space itself.
Okay, so the track that allows for a 5K or a 10K can happen, and also there will be an amphitheater there.
So there's some natural topography that would remain. We're not anticipating a formal amphitheater, more like the rolling hills that are out there now to keep some of that topography so you can use it as an informal amphitheater and bring in a stage. The track is actually the preference for these types of events is actually lawn. So they intentionally do not want to use the trail systems to have those facilities. So they run on the lawn.
Got it. Thank you.
I really do like the idea of a actual amphitheater there, though. I mean, it's almost like you have to put it there for for people to use it and do it. And, so, I mean, I hope that's something we are considering, because I'd love to see concerts in this area for sure. What a beautiful area to do concerts.
But not
That
if
would
it
be
takes away
sweet.
from the ability to have the 5 and 10Ks and stuff.
Oh no, obviously the 5 and 10Ks are
Yeah.
obviously you don't want to disrupt that, but it'd be cool to be able to do both.
Yeah. I mean, and you can see there is space here that for the 5 and 10Ks, you do want to allow a lot of flexibility for how they do their sponsorship tents, and the gathering zones and the winter circles and things like that needs a fair amount of space. And you can see by this large triangle here, the starting and the first run, the first leg of any of those races is kind of the most critical So that's where it takes up the bulk of the space. You can have some rolling hills, you can have topography, but it really needs to be kind of visible and open, which it is now, which is what makes this a really suitable site for these types of uses. If there was something that was a little bit more formalized, or if there was some dual duty, there is still some space that can that kind of function can happen. But a formal amphitheater in this zone where the natural topography is would preclude the ability to use this for that those 5 and 10K races. This next series, I wasn't going to go over any great detail. It's really just focused on Pleasant Glade, which did not change since the last time we had the conversation. And then the series of the trails through the various quadrants. I did want to pause and talk a little bit more about phasing. I think you saw these diagrams the last time as well. The initial phase is focusing on the core area itself. One thing we did do, and if you kind of looked into the details of the master plan, we pulled out almost a phase 1A and B. There's sort of a minimal investment that we're looking at, and we've been working with the park staff to carve out something that was more of a smaller chunk that you could do more immediately while you kind of look to try and continue to build the larger improvements. And then we asked the public, we had these 3 options for phase 2, whether once the initial improvements are the kind of highest priority of the trail system and the core area is done, what do we want to focus on next? And the options were the flexible open space. You can start really having those more developed meets and events and things happening in the open lawn. If we wanted to finish building out the core area, or if we wanted to continue to build the trail system into the eastern portion of the park. We asked about the open house and the online survey. And you can see, all of them at the open house were relatively even. I think a little bit more towards the trails, and certainly the flexible open space had the least amount of votes. When you got to the online survey, it was dead even between the core build out and trails, and a little less support for the flexible open space, but not by much. What we ended up doing in the master plan was really leaving these 3 phases defined and not trying to prioritize them amongst each other. I think as you think about what the opportunities might be, sponsorship, support, partnerships to help build out different portions of the park, we wanted to leave it very flexible. But this is still referenced in that master plan so we can see and recognize what the community's preferences were. And then we have the costs.
Oh, Julia, it looks like we have a question. Councilmember Vasquez?
Yes.
I don't know if it's, I was just thinking, we got a lot more votes during the online survey portion of our input gathering than we did from the open house, right? It was about twice as many people participating in the online survey.
At least,
So
yes.
it'd be interesting if we could combine the total feedback and see the percentages for overall, how everybody felt. But
Well, we generally don't combine them because we always ask at the open house for people to go take the online survey. So often they're
So it's
taking the
not
survey.
disparate data sets, so it might
It's
be some
not,
overlap.
yes,
Okay.
exactly. There's quite a bit of overlap, which is why we try not to combine them. So this phase 1A minimum improvements is what I mentioned before, looking at about half the parking stalls, maybe not even fully paved, loop trails and the disc golf in this area defined as 1, so that we are able to open the park and start to experience the trails within the system. That's what we were targeting for the smaller investment, a little more bite-sized chunk. The remaining of the park starts to go quite a bit higher when we think about all of the rest of the trails in this area, the secondary trails, more the paved trails, and the parking areas in the core start to add up very quickly. And then we've got the estimates.
Juliet, sorry, it looks
Yes.
like we have a question
Mhm.
from Councilmember Greenstein.
Yeah, I'm just curious. I mean, this is super exciting. How soon could we start on phase 1A?
Yeah.
I mean, we obviously have the money in reserves that, we could fund that part. How soon could we actually get moving on that?
Okay, so I'll address that question. So we would just have to look at, we would need design, because this is concept. So we would need design work. And then we would just need to look at what other projects the city has on its plate and figure out, if this one comes in, what else would drop off. We also would need to make sure that the financing the funding had at least a 5-year plan for maintenance and operation
Sure.
included.
Because I personally, I'd like to see us break ground on that before the end of the year.
Yeah, I would too. I mean, I hope we can get started on phase one. I'd like to see a plan for all these phases actually. And so.
Yeah, but I mean, I think phase 1A,
We
it
should
would
get
be
started.
huge if we could break ground and actually get phase 1A this year. I mean, I think we could do it. I think we have I mean, I'll be shocked if council isn't fully in support of that. So I just think we should move on this as soon as we can.
Me too.
This is awesome.
Second.
I'm just gonna stop here. I think we're done. No. Along the line of what the council member mentioned about the rest of the phases, we really didn't even try to prioritize out, but we did break them into smaller pieces that made sense. So we try really hard to think about easily dividable pieces. So if you were to build it, you're not having to come back later and remove anything. So each element can be built fairly independently from the others. And then the maintenance facility, there's a lot more detail in the actual report about the phases of the maintenance facility and coming different portions of the maintenance facility to come online at, with different elements of the park improvement. So it's not really intended to be a fully phase all at once, but that in and of itself has its own sub phases. There's an economic analysis that is the entire report is an appendix to the master plan. At a very high level, we're really looking at the effect of these various programmatic elements on the economic health and where we have the highest level of potential economic benefits. What he's mostly looking at when he does his analysis is what new revenues are associated with these features, which means you have people coming in that wouldn't already be spending money in this community. Where are the funding sources? Construction and operations costs. And in particular, those last two are because some of the details of the economic analysis, we also asked them to look at what is sort of the level that we need to charge for some of these facilities and uses and events in order to have cost recovery within a certain time frame. And then just a snapshot again of the high to medium impacts for these various elements. Disc golf and the private events kind of have the highest potential impact because those have the ability to really draw national or in some cases even international level events, which would bring those people who aren't already here into the community. Some of these other elements, while they do have a benefit, the benefit is more to smaller for people coming into the community and more people maybe just sort of having visitors or family members or other things coming to support it. We did even go into some of the elements that are not currently included in the master plan. So we have the long-term, the environmental learning center. We also at one point had explored zip lines and ropes courses, which would be vendor operated. We weren't quite ready to bring that fully into the master plan, but we wanted to recognize it's always a potential, and whether it's at Great Curio Park or a different park in the community, specialty camping and pickleball were all just useful information to evaluate since we were doing this study, and they could be used potentially for other locations.
Looks like Deputy Mayor had a question.
Just real quick. The road itself, if let's say, for example, we were able to do something this year, I don't know if that road itself is designed for heavy equipment to travel. And I'm not saying that should be part of your feasibility or anything like that, but I'm wondering, where would the access be? Which would it be the north portion of the road, the access for heavy equipment, or the southern portion of the road, or it? I know
which road are you talking about? The Park Drive or access off of Carpenter? Which road are we talking about?
Carpenter, to bring in the equipment that's needed to do excavation and stuff. I don't see the south side as being, a real good option, but it just came up in my mind. I know it's not neither here nor there at this point in time.
Yeah, it's a good question. We obviously we haven't gotten into where haul routes and equipment access and construction sort of would come from. It is a good question. I don't know.
Maybe we can address it next time.
Yeah. We have started to evaluate permitting and in particular looking at what triggers and timelines would be for permits. This one is draft. We just recently got some updated information from our environmental team to feed into this, as well as looking at SEPA and how SEPA plays into this in relation to the pros plan update that's coming. And then we've got some grant opportunities that we wanted to define. Most of these are through RCO, the State Recreation and Conservation Office. There is some community development type grants as well, but I know Jen has been in contact with the grant manager to start to see what of this we could try to get some grants more immediately for as well. And then where we're at, that red line, it's pushing off our page almost. So really want this opportunity to be for you to ask questions, give us any feedback, and then hoping for that adoption, the approval of the master plan on February 3rd.
Are there any questions? I mean, I tend to agree with Councilmember Greenstein here. I'd like to see a plan where we can get started on phase 1 as soon as possible. I don't know what that will take, but I hope we can. That is a priority for us this year, and I would like to see movement on it this year. We have the reserves for it. We have more than enough reserves for it. So I mean, I'd like to get started on seeing that come to fruition as soon as possible. What will that take for that to happen, Scott?
So I think we need to just nail down the major elements. I think restrooms probably the one game changer, because if we're having to extend utilities, that could actually change the amount of cost for this project. If we're limiting this to, I'll say, portable toilets and a parking field and walking trails, I think that could move quicker because you wouldn't have the extensive construction. But if our goal is to open up to the public the fastest possible, that could be a good route to follow.
Yeah, I mean, I don't mind that as a temporary route, but I want to continue to get the permanent bathrooms and everything else going as soon as possible too. Councilmember Greenstein?
No, I was just going to say the same thing. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, I think we do that as a temporary method, way to get it going faster. But obviously, at some point, we're going to have to bring the sewer lines and everything in to have actual bathrooms. I mean, I don't think long-term porta potties are an answer for this important of an asset, but to get it going and to get some trails open, at least to get the first phase going, absolutely.
Yeah.
So I think since we're geared up in February to come back with the finalization of plan, we can do some work in the interim and kind of conceptualize what that first phase in terms of the elements, and maybe get a better handle on what the cost of that plan would be, and also timing too.
Yeah.
Hey, Jen.
And I just wanted to mention, oh, go ahead.
Is this designed to be like Rainier Vista, where it's got the gate and it's closed at night?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I was just gonna say, we will need to definitely look at a timeline, because there's still a SEPA and cultural resources review. So there's some, permits that we would need to look at. We'd have to get with the capital projects team and see, what else is in the pipeline too for projects. But I was going to answer Deputy Mayor's question about the access. The existing access is adequate and would likely remain the construction access for the whole project.
So we wouldn't have to spend additional money on roads to change anything for access.
It sounds like it's adequate for construction access. We have to drill down, like city manager said, drill down on what the actual amenities would be, and then just come up with a timeline on what that could look like.
Yeah, well, hopefully you can do that work in the interim then, because this is a big priority for this council. And some of us have been waiting for a long time to see this happen, and so the sooner the better at this point. I think it's, what a great plan. I'd love to see, like I said, let's get started on phase 1. I'd like to see an outline, what's going to take it through the phases as well, and a financial plan to do that as well. So, but I definitely think we should get started on the first phase as soon as we possibly like to see that happen as soon as possible.
I'll grab some shovels and meet out there tomorrow.
Exactly.
Julia, your work has inspired an entire council.
I gotta tell you, I couldn't ask for a better end and a better council. This is why we do what we do. I think I'm just excited. I want to get out there too.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you so much. We really appreciate it.
Thanks
Thank
for all
you.
your work, Juliet.
Thank
Of course.
you.
Thank you very much. Have a good night.
Mhm. So next up, since you're here, Jen, the Heritage Capital Project Grant Museum Project.
Yep, just a quick one here. Share my screen. Oops, one more time. Okay, can you see this?
Yep.
All right.
Yeah, there you go.
So I wanted to provide a quick reminder of the current and second Washington State Historical Society Heritage Capital Projects grant that the city has received for the new museum and cultural center project. So I grabbed a few of the slides from the March 11th, 2021 Joint Historical Commission and City Council work session. So that was the last time you would have seen these slides. They'll look familiar, but it has been several months. So let's see. So here is the site plan, and you all have seen this, but for the benefit of the new council member, I definitely wanted to include this. It's also easier to show what the phase one of the project is, which is the depot and the playground and the Lebanon Street extension, which is also in the transportation plan, and then half of this parking lot. So that's the phase one that's already been completed. So you'll see that one here, and then phase two is also completed, and that was the first Heritage Capital Projects grant. So when I talk about the second one, that's the one that we're on now. So the second phase was design of the entire site and the building. And then, so here we are here. And just as a reminder, in May 2020, the council passed a resolution to approve the application for this portion here. And the funds would pay for the building demolition and site clearing. And at that time, the approximate timeline was reported out as demolition and site work beginning once the contract was executed with Washington State Historical Society. And that was supposed to be in the fall of 2021. So we're pretty close to that intended timeline, just a few months later here in the beginning of 2022. The contract was executed last month. You may recall the December 2nd City Council meeting. It was on the consent agenda. And then of course, phase four will be the building and site construction. And I'll be providing an update on that at your upcoming joint work session with the Historical Commission next month. But just wanted to show a couple of the renderings. Again, benefit of the new council member. This is the building facing west. If you're standing at the building and looking west, this is the back kind of corner of the building, which is facing to the north. And then here's another north view with that community room. And that's the kind of the event lawn right here. Next steps, next Thursday, January 20th, Ashley Smith, Capital Projects Manager, will be presenting a bid approval for the phase three work. And then completion of phase three will come next, obviously, with work starting sometime in February. She said there's 80 working days for the project, so it'll take approximately 4 months to complete. And then, like I said, larger project update coming February 24th for you. Yes.
Robin?
What's a feasible, like for the final phase, the 13 million to actually do the build, what is a feasible estimated timeline? I know we don't have the money yet. We have to demo the building first, but like when could it be done?
Yeah, so our intended timeline, which I'll share with you at the upcoming work session, is construction in 2026. So, and that's, and I'll show you like kind of in between now and then. We've got a rough draft of the slides. It's not quite ready tonight, but we'll want to have that discussion too with Historical Commission when they're here with you.
Ed?
Yeah, let me preface by saying I'm indifferent about this topic. But regarding the museum, I'm sorry, not the museum, the warehouse that's standing now, if we're not going to actually try to break ground until 2026, would it be beneficial to hold on to the warehouse for longer than another year to utilize it? I'm sure that there's potential rental value. You know, it's not going to be a huge money maker, but it is an asset that we have that is still currently standing. Would that interfere with the long-term plans if we just delayed the demo a year, since we're not going to break ground on the new museum until 2026?
Yeah, so with the application, that's a good question. With the application of this Heritage Capital Projects grant, which is the second one, there is in the contract a time period that we have to complete the work. And so we would be out of compliance with that grant requirement to wait. And the reason we wanted to move forward is because we wanted to best leverage the match that we could, that the city had invested. And so we were, for this latest one, we were able to use the match for the from the depot building and from the playground construction, which helped us leverage to get to that 607,000. And then it was a matter of seeing what all we could do in the next logical step for the project. And so in trying to make steps forward and keep the project going, at that combined with the, like I said, the grant requirements are the reasons that we would just move forward, and we'll still use that site. We are going to do some upgrades for the food truck plaza, which I think you all already know about because it's in the approved budget. Some temporary infrastructure improvements out there to make the food truck plaza improved, and then also being able to do share information about the museum project. So we're looking at doing a kiosk out there with storyboards regarding the project, and we can also whatever we can use, whatever events we can do out there to promote, fundraise for the museum project will be beneficial.
Okay.
So it's a timing issue. We used the match for the building, the depot and stuff, requirements to get this. So that's why we're going forward now.
I will also add there are expenses with operating that warehouse as well.
Yeah.
It's staff
Gotta
resources.
keep the lights on.
Gotta keep the lights on. It's also managing that space, and we've had tenants in there, which is great.
Yeah.
But it can also be workload and capacity, especially for I could ask our facilities staff. It's an old building. There's a lot of stuff that kind of goes wrong with it, but yeah. So that's just a factor I'll throw in there as well.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Jen. Have a great night. So next, do we have the council assignments and stuff that you can put up now, Scott?
We do. So I will share my screen, and I assume Mary just want to walk through those, and if there's questions.
We did that. The mayor and myself and Scott met just before this meeting, and we're trying to go through everyone's recommendations, and so we'll put everything up and see if we can come to some agreements here.
So you should see my screen pretty soon.
Okay. So first is the Community Action Council. Right now, Mike has been the primary on that, and he wanted to continue to be the primary, but Ed, I know you showed some interest in that as well. And so what I suggest is when Mike is back next week, you guys can talk about who wants to be the primary and who wants to be the alternate on that. Then on the EDC, I know Ed, you said you didn't want to continue on that, and so Malcolm said he would take over as the primary on that, and you can be the alternate. Emergency Medical Services, Mike continues to be the. Oh no, it looks like Lenny, you're the primary on that.
Yeah, I'm the vice chair of EMS.
Yep. So you'll stay that. The Regional Housing Council. This is an ongoing discussion with the region. I know Carolyn, you're the primary on, and Lenny's been the alternate. There's been some discussion about the mayors getting involved in the Regional Housing Council. And so right now, we're gonna have to sort of wait and see how what the other jurisdictions decide on that as well. And so either I can be the primary, Carolyn, you can be the alternate when we work together, or we'll have to see how that all plays out. What the rest of the region's gonna decide on that. The next on the intercity transit, it shows Carolyn. You still plan on being a primary on that, right? On intercity transit? You're on mute.
You're muted.
I thought Robin had wanted to be the primary.
Okay, I wasn't quite sure about that. That's what we wanted to wait. Robin, did you want to be the primary, or do you have a conflict with that?
Yeah, I was uncertain about that one just because of the time when it meets.
So do you know yet?
Challenging.
Do you know if you can make that or not, Robin?
Yes,
You can or cannot?
I can.
Okay, so then, Carolyn, do you have no problem with her being the primary?
No, I don't. I'd be happy to serve as alternate on that.
Okay,
Yep.
then let's do that. Then Robin, you can be the primary, and Carolyn, you can be the alternate. The next joint animal services, Ed's gonna be the primary on that. I know, and
That's
then
fine.
Malcolm will be the alternate. And then on lot, I think Carolyn, you're gonna be the primary on that. And then Ed will be the alternate. Is that okay?
That's fine with me.
Okay.
Yeah, that's fine. Mr. Mayor, I would like to keep the primary slot for the VCB. I have a good working relationship with the board there, and I think we're making progress. I'd very much like to.
Okay, there was some confusion about that. We couldn't quite tell what you want to do on the VCB. And so if you want to be the primary on the VCB, that's fine. We are trying to accommodate you and make.
No, I appreciate that. Yeah, no, I really appreciate that. So yeah, I would love to continue that operation as the primary.
Okay. Perfect. You can be the primary on that. Malcolm was going to step up for you if you didn't want that, but that's great. So
thank you, Deputy Mayor.
Yeah. Orca. Robin, we have you as the primary on Orca. Can you do that?
Yes.
Okay, and then Carolyn will be the alternate. And then solid waste. We still have you as the primary in solid waste. And no one else really put that on there.
That's fine.
Okay. And then Lenny's going to continue to be the primary on TCOM. And Mike is the primary on the Thurston County Law and Justice. Malcolm's been the primary on the Thurston Regional Planning Council. And then, oh, no, we're going to make Robin the primary on the Thurston Regional Planning Council. And Malcolm will be the alternate. Is that we decide, right, guys?
And that's fine with me, if it's fine with Deputy Mayor.
Is that what we decide, Malcolm?
Because I think it was higher up on her list. It appears as if the time frame works for her, so I'm fine with that.
So you'll be the primary in TRPC going forward, Robin. And then Malcolm will continue to be the primary in Thurston Thrives. You can be the alternate on Thurston Thrives, Robin.
There's Andy.
Yep.
I don't know if the group is aware, but Thurston Thrives is coordinating council is not going to continue to operate the way it has been. They are making the members of the Thurston Thrives various action team leaders will be the coordinating council, and the cities would be part of a like twice a year council of governments basically meeting. And the only way for Lacey to really be involved otherwise is if we want to buy in to the executive committee. It's a pay to play kind of a thing. So just want everybody to be aware that that change is happening.
Okay. Yeah, I know Malcolm talked a little bit about that too, and there's a meeting coming up. They're gonna learn more about that and report back out to the council on it. So,
yep.
So Transportation Policy Board is the one intergovernmental committee that I have. I've been the chair and will continue to be chair on that. Let's see, the Climate Action Steering Committee. It's Carolyn can still continue to be the primary, and with Robin being the alternate. The left one, it's going to stay the same with Lenny and Michael. That they don't meet very often. It's very rare to meet.
That one is not very time consuming. Yeah, I'm happy to stay there.
Yeah. Lodging tax, Malcolm has been the primary on that. Ed's going to be the alternate with that. Thurston Chamber. So on the Thurston Coalition Against Human Trafficking, there's been several people show their interest in that. Now, Malcolm's been a part of that group for a long time. Ed, you showed some interest in that, and Robin showed some interest in on that. My recommendation is for the three of you to go to the next meeting and talk out. There's different leadership things that happen within that Thurston County Coalition Against Human Trafficking that if each one of you want to play a part in that, you're more than welcome to. And so we'll get you the information about when they meet again. And I would encourage you, if you want to be involved in that, to be involved in that. And so
I would relent and allow our deputy mayor to continue being the primary. I just had an interest in it, and I figured it's just an opportunity to learn a little bit more about what's going on with human trafficking. But if Malcolm wants to stay the primary, I have absolutely no objection to that at all.
Yeah, well, I think that makes sense, Malcolm. The thing is I think the more that we have if Ed and Robin, if you guys want to get involved in it, but the more information that we have as and representation even from this council shows that, that this is a priority for Lacey. I think that's a good thing. So I think you have opportunities to get involved in that organization, and I would encourage you to follow up with that. And so we'll get information out to you, both you, Ed and Robin, about when they're going to be meeting again, and then you guys can sort of make up your minds on how much you guys want to get involved in that.
Now, I am a Lacey Chamber ambassador. I'm very much involved with the Lacey Chamber.
Okay.
Would love to remain the primary on that,
okay,
if possible.
We couldn't tell on that either, so that's fine.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
My bad. I'll do better in my communication.
Yeah, we couldn't quite tell on that. And then so on the Lacey Youth Council, Robin, I know you showed some interest in that. Typically, the mayor, myself, and the deputy mayor have been a part of the Lacey Youth Council from the get-go. Robin, if you're interested in learning more about the Lacey Youth Council, what I do recommend is you, me, and can meet with Kelly and with Shannon and see where, I've been busy the last several meetings, which I've missed, and I feel like I'm I'm a little behind the times on what's going on with the Lacey Youth Council. But I would love to work with you, Robin, and let's meet with Shannon and Kelly and see where we fit in the Lacey Youth Council going forward. You know, for a long time, it was myself and the deputy mayor would be there every meeting, sort of going along with the meetings. But, you know, I know so much has sort of transpired recently with the Lacey Youth Council. I would love to get caught up with what's going on with the Youth Council, and if we can figure out a time where we can meet, you, Robin, and myself, and the Youth Council can meet, we can figure out where we sort of can fit in going forward. Does that sound like a plan?
Sounds fine. I was going to say I would yield the responsibility of the Lacey Youth Council to the deputy mayor if he was interested. My understanding of the assignment was that we were supposed to volunteer for 3 things. So in each of the categories, I put my name down for 3 committees.
Sure.
I'm not saying I have to be on all 3 of those committees.
Okay, well, what I'll do is I will meet with Shannon and Kelly and see where we're at with the, I've been saying I've been wanting to do that for a while, because I've been sort of been out of the loop. And then we'll talk about where the rest of the council can fit into that. If, you know, if the deputy mayor needs to be a part of that or whatever, and, you know, we'll figure out that going forward. So, okay, can you go forward? So, Community Relations Committee, shows Carolyn, Lenny, and Michael. Finance, it's my, so typically it's the Finance Committee has always been made up of the mayor, the deputy mayor, and another council member. And so we're sort of continuing that with this. So we have the myself, the deputy mayor, and Lenny. And then in general government, it's myself, Ed, and Lenny, because Ed put that as his first choice. Land use, it's Carolyn, Ed, and Robin. Transportation, Malcolm, Michael, and Robin. And then utilities, Carolyn, Ed, and Michael. Does that all look reasonable?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. We made it through it. Thank you. That's
Good
always
job, Mayor.
Smooth.
it's always tough coming up with these assignments, but I think we got it good going forward. So appreciate everyone's help on that, and look forward to serving with y'all. So okay, last thing, Scott, home fund.
So I just want to make sure council's aware, as you know, you're aware that Thurston County is contemplating the establishment of a home fund. That's the affordable sales and use tax. That's a 1/10 of 1% to go toward specific items, helping obviously affordable housing. And also there's a homeless element to it, but also assisting specific groups with housing. We've had some discussions at a regional level. I will share with you, I sent an email to council that there was a regional discussion made up of the mayors as well as the chair of the county commissioner and the deputy mayors. And there was a discussion with the county about how would, if a home fund were to be endorsed or approved, how would decisions be made with the regional housing, with the home fund. So during that meeting, I would say the mayor is advocating for the fact that it would make sense if the Regional Housing Council would be the body that made those funding decisions. That was, I'll say, agreed to in principle. I think there was a lot of discussion about the current structure of the Regional Housing Council, and was there a better way to support the Regional Housing Council that had a dedicated staff that actually worked for the board, if you will, of the representatives that served on the Regional Housing Council. And I think there's been a lot of discussions in the community. If we're going to spend this type of money, we need a better way to share with the community how the money is being spent, tracking those dollars, showing where the gaps are, and then report that on at least an annual basis so people have confidence that the home fund is meeting the intent or priorities that have been stated. Another major discussion at that meeting, again, this happened prior to the end of the year, was Olympia's willingness to consider their home fund to be combined with Thurston County's home fund if they again approved it. Last Tuesday, Olympia City Council passed a resolution of intent that essentially stated that they would be willing to coordinate work with Thurston County if they also adopted a home fund. So you'd essentially have 2 potential funds working in concert together. The county has a draft ordinance that their Board of County Commissioners will be reviewing next Tuesday for the potential adoption of a home fund and the three major principles I just outlined. The Regional Housing Council would be the decision-making body to make funding recommendations. The structure would be looked at, which would require an interlocal agreement amendment that we currently have now, and then that component of reporting to the public. So I want to make sure council is aware of that. I know there's been discussion in the past, and maybe just an opportunity to maybe ask questions or further discussion.
So when it became clear that the Thurston County was going to go forward with the home fund, I sort of got involved at that point, and like I said, met with Scott, and I said, you know, there's three major components that, from Lacey's standpoint, at least talking to Scott and understanding where this council's at, where what we would like to see if this goes forward. And I remember at the time, you know, Scott wasn't really didn't think that, you know, that all those three things were necessarily going to be agreed upon. But I met with Ty, the chair of the county commission, and said, you know, this is where we're at. This is what we'd like to see. You know, he then met with Olympia, and basically all those three things that we are hoping to see that the region has agreed upon. And so at this point, I feel pretty happy about where we're at, and where this could have gone, and you know, where we end up at has been pretty amazing to see. You know, and that's why this has been such an important issue. You know, the fact that we can get Olympia and Thurston County combine their funds, have the Regional Housing Council sort of be the lead, have independent staff working for the Regional Housing Council, I think is really important, and they agreed with that. Having the recommendation come from the Regional Housing Council and it be an up or down vote from the county commission, so the county commission is not changing the decisions, is something that the county didn't agree, you know, has come back and said, okay, we'll agree on. So basically everything that we asked for, they've agreed on. And so at this point, the only question that we have is what will the advisory body look like that's going to be looking at recommendations that goes back to the Regional Housing Council. There's still some details in here that needs to be worked out, but the main structure, everything that I basically asked for and talked to Ty about, the region that has all been on the same page and agreed with, I think has made some really big progress. Now, I know that it's been a tough month or so with communication with the region on issues like this. And I know Councilmember Greenstein, I know several people have been very frustrated about communication. And the more that we realize, the more I think it goes back to shows you how important it is that we are communicating with our region on a regular basis. And the fact that the Regional Housing Council can make, you know, be that body where we're talking these things through and getting on the same page, I think is really important. Now, I still think, as I stated in my state of the community address just yesterday, you know, we need to have some agreement as a region going forward about standards, about accountability, all those things that we would like to see. And so I think there's some hard conversations ahead, but so far, when we're talking elected to electeds, we have some universal agreement. Now, what we're seeing this disconnect so far is staff to staff, where, you know, things going on behind the scenes that the elected officials have not been involved in. And so that's why communication is so important. And I think we need to do better as a region about communicating on issues like this. And but so far, the commitment has that we will get better at that. I know there's Rick is trying to pull together a meeting with Olympia and Thurston County and Lacey, so we can talk about some of the miscommunication that's happened. And but I feel like we're heading in the right direction. You know, the fact that the home fund's going forward, no matter, you know, regardless, Now it's about how we can make sure it's run effectively, how we can put our priorities as a council, which is permanent supportive housing, how we can start building units, hopefully as soon as possible and get some agreement on that. And so far, everything we're hearing from electeds to electeds, and it sounds like we're heading in that direction. So there's still going to be some conversation about who makes up the regional housing council, who's going to be there at the very beginning, make sure we get off the ground, how we hire, who we hire as an executive director type person to lead the regional housing council. That's been sort of my concern, is that the leadership is, of the regional housing council has just been sort of scattered, right? I mean, it's been staff members from each of the jurisdictions sort of going forward. I really want strong leadership, out of the regional housing council who can lead us as a region forward. And so the fact that the county has agreed to that as well, I think is really important. So everything I've sort of wanted and asked for, they've said, okay. And so I think it's been pretty good news so far, notwithstanding this past some miscommunications that we've had from staff to staff and some other things that have gone on. But I think we are headed in the right direction. Does anyone have any questions? Okay, thank you, Scott. Appreciate it. Okay, we've reached the end of our agenda. Thank you, everyone. And without objection, I'll call this meeting adjourned.